What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the DC Sports Huddle. It is sponsored by MGM National Harbor. For the latest in Washington sports, visit MGM National Harbor and experience a sports fan's paradise. I am Rob Woodfork, wearing a stylish sweater. George Wallace is perpetually late, and the man continuing the years-long tradition of WTOP morning sports anchors testing the bounds of the human body's need for sleep, the king of the tri-corner hat, Dave Preston. Now,
why does he get that big of intro?
Because I wrote it down and I needed to use it. So we're starting with the ongoing search, and it feels like it's been going on forever. The ongoing Commander search for the offensive coordinator vacancy. The Kansas City Chiefs celebrating their second Super Bowl title in 4 years. They had the big confetti. They had the big parade through the streets of Kansas City, and now their offensive coordinator is coming to Washington for what is basically a lateral move, even though he should be a head coach in the NFL probably about 5 years in. We will discuss that a little bit further into the show, but in the immediacy, we are talking about the fits for Eric Bieniemy as he is, as of this recording, he is talking to the Washington Commanders about that offensive coordinator vacancy out in Ashburn. Now, George Wallace, we've been waiting a while for this, and obviously Washington has been waiting a while for this because they've basically held up this search so that they could talk to Eric Bieniemy after the Super Bowl. So with that in mind, I mean, you got to think that he's the guy, right?
Well, maybe Ron Rivera is hoping that, I mean, because he's waited all this time. This is the 8th candidate to interview for the spot. They did talk to Greg Roman this week. I don't know why that took so long. He's been out with the Ravens for a few weeks now. What all of a sudden why all of a sudden that transpired? Maybe figuring Bieniemy wasn't going to be a shot, so they had to see what they had maybe in Greg Roman. I still think it's going to be somebody like Pat Shurmur, who's just kind of like, they got to fill the spot. Nobody's going to really want it. For Bieniemy, he let his contract expire in Kansas City, so he doesn't really have that right now. And Andy Reid saying how he should be able to run his own show as an offense. But, again, and I'll say it like I've said it before, why would you want to hitch your wagon to this situation right now? You don't know what's going on. There's a lot up in the air. Your head coach could be blown out in 2 months before, camp starts. If you get, if this ownership situation goes down. Now, maybe you do take it thinking that this could be a shot to be a head coach if that does happen. Maybe that's the case. For Bieniemy, he hasn't really. I mean, Andy Reid was calling the, more hands-on with the offense in Kansas City than Ron Rivera is here. So by that, when he says he should be able to run his own show, that's what this means. Maybe come in and get your whole imprint on the offense, of course, with Ron Rivera right there, but you kind of link to a defensive coach and maybe have your input that way. So we'll see. I mean, deep down, I just don't know if he takes it. I don't think he does. I don't know. I just don't. There's too much up in the air for me here to take that, especially if you still want to be a head coach. Now, maybe look, you're done in Kansas City. You've done what you can do, and you want to just change the scenery. I'm fine with that. But to go from leaving, 5 straight AFC Championship games with Patrick Mahomes twice in 4 years to come here, I mean, let's go like this.
And actually, you know what? And Dave Preston has actually made this point a few times on here, comparing it to when Marvin Lewis came here once upon a time. Because remember, when he came to Washington, this was after that great 2000 Ravens defense. He didn't get hired in Cincinnati right after that, as he probably should have. He ended up having a year here in Washington where, you build the resume up a little more and show teams what you're able to do with less, because they did have a couple of future Hall of Famers on that Ravens defense. He comes here with less and still has a productive unit. And that was a team that, if I recall correctly, I think finished 7-9 that year.
Right. How long after was it?
It was the year after. Not the year after. So they won the Super Bowl. He stayed another year, 2001. I think it was the first year of Spurrier, 2002, where Marvin Lewis came here. And so, I mean, that it's not an apples to apples comparison.
Yeah.
But I think Dave made the point that maybe you do have to lay over somewhere. And here's the thing. The thing that drives me crazy about this whole discussion is that play calling is so utterly unimportant a skill set for a head coach in the NFL. I don't know why people keep talking about it. That's important for a coordinator. That is not important for a head coach.
Yeah, but some head coaches like to do it, though.
Takes for him to get on people's radars, then yes, Washington is a good place because you will have autonomy on that offense. And so, and if you turn water into wine, hey, it's not even going to be a Super Bowl scenario. Let's say he comes here. He's the offensive coordinator. Sam Howell is good, but not great. They stun everybody and win the NFC East for whatever crazy reason. And then they actually mess around and win a playoff game. And then flame out in the divisional round like we've seen them do a million times before. So even that is just such a drastic improvement over what this team has been for the last 15 years. That has to put him on people's radars. And I think that's kind of what happened with Marvin Lewis, Dave, is that he came here. They weren't any great shakes, but they were like, okay, he did more with less there. Maybe this guy's a head coach.
Except there's one thing I guarantee you, that Ron Rivera will at least know some of the guys on the offensive side of the ball, unlike Steve Spurrier, who didn't know who was who for half of that roster. I've thought of other offensive assistants who have had to go elsewhere before getting their head coaching job after being really after shining in their role. And I think of the Hall of Famer Bill Wallace, who was stuck behind Paul Brown at Cincinnati, didn't get the head coaching job, wound up going to the Chargers when they were a cesspool before Dan Fouts became Dan Fouts, and really rescued almost the career of Dan Fouts, got him on the right track to where a few years later under Don Coryell, Fouts was able to, continue the road to becoming a Hall of Famer. And is that what Eric Bieniemy has to do? Because he hasn't just been the offensive coordinator for a very successful offense, but a championship team, a team that has contended, 5 straight, not just 5 straight division titles, but 5 straight trips to the AFC Championship game, where they have hosted the AFC Championship game. So I think it gives him an opportunity to come here and, as you mentioned, see what he can do, see if he can put a shine to the dull apple that is the Washington offense. And he will have personnel here that he can take advantage of. I like the wide receiver group. He doesn't have a tight end to really work with, but he's got some backs that he can throw to. J.D. McKissick, if he gets healthy and comes back, that's an option. And he has a young, impressionable quarterback that he can bring in as well. One of the reasons why I think one might be skittish of bringing Eric Bieniemy in is that would mean a new offensive system for Sam Howell in year 2. If Bieniemy only stays 1 year, or you blow out the coaching staff, that would be a third one in 3 years. And that doesn't include his senior year of college, where he had a different offensive system as well. But the Burgundy and Gold could do a lot worse than bring in someone of Eric Bieniemy's character, of Eric Bieniemy's accomplishments in the game. So if they're able to get him here, more power to them. And if it's just 1 year, well, you know what? Let's see what we can do with the offense that he brings in and the tweaks that he does.
And I've heard people say that he's going to come in and they're going to pass more than Ron Rivera likes. But Eric Bieniemy, I'm old enough to remember when Eric Bieniemy was a running back in the NFL. He came into the league as a coach, as a running backs coach. So I can't imagine that a guy with that background is going to come in and then try to chuck it all over the yard with what is essentially a rookie quarterback, George.
Yeah, I mean, and you go in, you have to. The head coach sets the tone. Like, it's his philosophy. Yeah. If he wants to run the ball 2-1, and you're going to have to do that, or you're not going to have to get the job. I mean, that's just the way it goes. I mean, it's if that's in fact what Ron and Martin want to do, which I still have a hard time believing. But yeah, I mean, if either you're not going to fall in line, or you're going to be out of a job. But as far as the Sam Howell thing and a different system in year 2, year 3, look, as far as I'm concerned, this year you play for this year. I mean, after, who knows what's going to happen as far as if new owners come in. I mean, who's your quarterback going to be? You're going to have a new coach who's not going to want Sam Howell. There's so many things. I hear what you're saying, Dave, but if it were all things be equal, and you're going to be in this spot for a while, maybe, but you can, I don't think you can look at that moving past this year. You know what I mean? Like, you can't just say, well, wait a minute, this doesn't work out. Sam Howell's got another option, another system coming up. Well, Sam Howell may not be here. Nobody may be.
That.
So,
oh man, I thought we were building around this guy.
Well, we might. They may not want to. Get him one of your hats.
Hey,
yeah, right. So here's the thing. I mean, you mentioned, George, that they've talked to 8 different coordinators. So let's say Eric Bieniemy says, you know what, this job is beneath me, or I don't like because we actually saw this with Brian Flores, where he was in the mix for the head coaching job in Arizona. And he said, I got a gut feeling that this ain't a good spot. So I took a defensive coordinator gig in Minnesota. What if Bieniemy does the same thing? Has the interview, he's like, yeah, I don't like these 1974 facilities you guys got here in Ashburn, and I don't like the vibe here, and it feels like everybody knows that they're about to get blown out, and I want to take my talents elsewhere. Then where does that leave them? I think Pat Shurmur is the best of the lot that they've spoken to, because
that's why I said it. I agree with that.
Yeah, he has ties to he's got a history of developing younger quarterbacks. And he has ties to Ron Rivera from their time together in Philadelphia, as does Eric Bieniemy. The tail end of his playing career, he was in Philadelphia when they were on staff there. So I would say Pat Shurmur might be the best available if Bieniemy is not the guy. I still think Bieniemy's the number one guy. I think Pat Shurmur would be a close second, and Greg Roman only if he can bring Lamar Jackson with him. That's the only way. I mean, and I don't know how Greg Roman could possibly be a fit, because there's talk around the league that basically receivers don't want to be in Baltimore because that offense de-emphasizes the receiver so much. What's the strongest position Washington has? It's the wide receiver position.
And punter.
Yeah, well, that too. But
which, if Greg Roman comes here, maybe we'll see Tress Way a lot more. Who knows?
You almost definitely will. But I mean, for a guy who, for a coach that wants to run it 2-to-1 ratio, like Ron Rivera said he wants to, Greg Roman certainly fits that bill. But again, I don't know that he has the same tools here that he had in Baltimore.
Yeah, and look, and to your point about oh man, lost my train of thought. Oh, about him being the top choice. I think he's obviously the top choice. They waited for him to talk to him. Like if they thought that Roman was the top choice or Shurmur, then they would have made this hire 2-3 weeks ago when they could have done it. So
and also, I think it's interesting to that point, real quick. I think it's interesting because Baltimore was another team that was tied to wanting to talk to Bieniemy, and then right at the point where he's available, they hired Todd Monken, who's just like, he's a meh hire.
Yeah.
And
they didn't even talk to Eric, right? EB, yeah. So I think obviously he's the top choice. I find it hard to believe that it's not his if he wants it.
Yeah.
So,
and I think he'll have an opportunity if things do arise. I think from the moment that the coordinator position opened up, he was our ordained leader in the clubhouse as far as the dream hire. Who would you most like to bring in? Unfortunately, the way that this team has run itself over the last 20 plus years, we often get the second, third, or even fourth, choice. Jim Zorn was hired as a head coach by this franchise at one point, and at no point was he on the shopping list for who we would like to see in that role. And I think that one has
why that was.
Yeah, one feels that there's a very good chance to be underwhelmed. But I think that as an organization, you had to hold out for the superstar coordinator, Eric Bieniemy, because this offense did need some flash this past season. Regardless of who was playing quarterback, you needed a little bit more zip, a little bit more imagination. Some of that was the fact that Scott Turner was maybe promoted a little too soon beyond his skill set from passing game coordinator or quarterbacks coach or whatever the heck he was for 6 games down in Carolina to running a whole offense here. And so if they do, regardless of who they bring in barring a disaster, they will bring in someone who has made his bones as a coordinator in the NFL and can bring a little bit of zip to what was a very bland offense at times this past fall.
Absolutely. And I just have to say this. I mean, Eric Bieniemy, would be great to get him here. And I think it would be a good fit, but this man should have been a head coach 5 years ago. based on what they've done in Kansas City, based on what he's been at the helm of, we just watched the Super Bowl in which the offense scored on every single possession out of halftime. You're talking about halftime adjustments. You're talking about, being able to, put the offense in the best position possible to win you a football game. I mean, all of that happened. All of that happened. And yes, Patrick Mahomes is brilliant. And yes, Andy Reid is a terrific head coach, one of the greatest to do it. But let's not act like Eric Bieniemy is sitting on the sideline sipping Mai Tais while this is happening. This is not, he's not a bystander for this. And the NFL is treating him like he is. And that's the thing that's driving me crazy. And I just wrote this column for WTOP.com. And I've written this column, I swear to God, 12 times over the course of the almost 12 years that I've worked here. And every single hiring cycle, there is some sort of egregious hire. And we just saw the last 2 jobs filled by the losing coordinators from the Super Bowl. I just told you that Bieniemy's offense scored on every possession in the second half on Gannon's defense, and he gets the head coaching job in Arizona. Now, it boggles my mind. It boggles my mind. And if you want to take Bieniemy out of the equation, you can for whatever. He had some character stuff maybe when he was in college and on the front end of his career. I get that. But we've seen white coaches get hired with that same, with some of those same questions in character and same questions in production and all of that. So, you want to take him out of the equation, fine. Steve Wilkes should have gotten the Carolina Panthers gig. And I think the other thing that has to be said is just because they're hiring white coaches, some of these guys work out. So it's not that they're bad hires. I think Frank Reich is a great hire. I think he's a terrific hire. He just didn't deserve to get that job over somebody who literally won as many games in only 12 tries as his predecessor did in 2.5 seasons. Think about that. With the same roster, no training camp, he did that. And so that's what drives me crazy, is that there are competent and deserving coaches who are getting passed over for reasons that do not make a lick of sense. So I'm tired of writing a column, and you can just say, well, don't write the column. I mean, I'm not the one who put the race card in the deck, okay? Me pointing it out doesn't mean that I'm creating this issue. The issue exists, and it needs to be spoken on until it is fixed. And the NFL, it's led by cowards because they haven't fixed it yet.
And I think what's unfortunate is that I thought that we were beyond this. I remember when Art Shell became the first African-American head coach in the NFL. I remember when Tony Dungy, after not getting bites at the apple, probably 2 or 3 years in a row, finally got his chance in Tampa Bay, and then was able to win a Super Bowl in Indianapolis in a game where they beat the Bears, coached by Lovie Smith. And one thought that 10, 15 years ago that I'm not saying that in 2006, 2007, I thought that the league would have 16 African-American coaches, but I thought there'd be a lot more than there are right now. I thought
there'd be more than 3. I mean, that's the thing. And nobody's saying that it needs to be, because the league in terms of the players, you're talking probably about 2/3 black. Nobody's saying 2/3 of the coaches in the league need to be black, but it needs to be more than 3. And it needs to be closer to 50% than it is.
And it feels like with a lot of the hires, and the 2 of the hires that were very uninspiring out of the gate actually turned out to be okay relatively. Nick Sirianni gave one of the worst press conferences since Jim Zorn was hired in Washington. Terrible. And Dan Campbell made you seriously consider the well-being of him and his team. And both of them in just 2 years, both of them played well. So for those who say that some of these coaches, like a Byron Leftwich or a Steve Wilkes, they don't interview well. Well, you know what? Guys who were absolutely, just abominations as interviews, as press conference guys, were able to turn things around within 2 years. So it's the unfortunate story that won't leave the room in the NFL. And until there's actual change, we're going to be having the same conversation next year, I hate to, say.
Yeah, and it's not even unique to the NFL, because Kevin Sumlin just landed at Maryland. That man should be a head coach. He should still be a head coach. And I know things didn't go well for him in Arizona. You probably watched it a little closer than I did, Dave. But I know things didn't go well for him in Arizona, but what he did at Texas A&M is actually a smidge better than what you're seeing out of Jimbo Fisher. And that man keeps getting paid more and more money on top of money. So
key is in this world, you need to get a good agent. That's first and foremost.
And I'll take Sumlin though.
Be the right complexion.
Yeah.
I'll take Sumlin in College Parks. Just watch your mouth.
That'll be fun. That'll be fun to see.
And that's what I'm saying. That's going to be that's a terrific get for Maryland. Yeah. But it's a get that shouldn't be available. It's the same thing as Eric Bieniemy. It's a great get for Washington if they can pull it, but he shouldn't be available. He should be running his own team. We're going to pivot quickly to the Nationals in what is, I'm going to go ahead and say it, guys. This is the least anticipated Nationals season ever. We're going into, what is this, the 19th spring training for the Nationals in their history. I can't remember a time where there was less juice surrounding this team. And then the biggest news is Stephen Strasburg, to the surprise of no one, had a setback with his thoracic surgery. And and they're using the term shutdown again, which is one that you don't want to hear associated with that player in particular. So he won the MVP of the World Series in 2019. Since then, guys, 8 games, 31 1/3 innings. That's all you've gotten from him. I mean,
yeah, it's sad.
He's got even if he doesn't retire, he's 34 years old. Even if he doesn't retire, he's got to be done as a National, right?
I think he's going to, well, with the I guess with the street cred that he's built with the team, with the organization, they're paying him anyways. They're going to let him trot himself, because unlike football where you can cut a guy and get some of the money back, or even in hockey, baseball, you're paying that regardless of whether, unless there's some unforeseen circumstance, where he runs off to Europe or something like that. But and even then, I think the union would still get him his money. But I think that he's going to try to do whatever he can to pitch. But what makes this such an absolutely bad deal, this is the worst case scenario. This is worse than the worst case scenario. When he signed, my worst case scenario was, okay, maybe he wins 10 games in 2020. Maybe he wins 15 games combined between 21 and 22, thinking of those as full seasons, not the 60-game mess that we had a few years ago. And then maybe once they get to year 4 and 5, maybe he has issues and he goes off the rails then. No, the worst case scenario for years 5, 6, and 7, we got in 1, 2, and 3, and you can only get worse from there. And what really hurts is that they put all their eggs into the Strasburg and Corbin baskets a few years ago, long term. And for a team that's built on pitching, the worst ERA for starters in the entire majors, 5.97. Just for that to happen. And that's one of the reasons why they wound up deciding to blow up the team at this time. But unfortunately, while they try to reboot or quickly revamp this Nationals team back to a playoff contender, you've really broken some hearts by trading away a fantastic player in Trey Turner and a generational player in Juan Soto. And yes, you're getting prospects back, but you've lost something with your fans who now the 2019 season, it's like, did it really happen? Where there's no question for Caps fans that yes, the 2018 Cup run happened, because you can still go to games and see Nicholas Backstrom, even though he's hobbled, Tom Wilson, even though he's injured half the time, TJ Oshie, even though he's older, Alex Ovechkin is still producing at a high level. And even if he wasn't, he'd still be with the team. So you can still extend those memories. From 2019, you got, Patrick Corbin, who is leading the league in losses a couple years in a row. So it's very unfortunate that, as Rob, you mentioned, you're absolutely right, very little buzz surrounding the Nats this season in spring training.
I mean, they lost. When you traded Juan Soto, you've given me no reason to care. They're my job. And that's it, period.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you traded away Juan Soto. Give me one reason to care. CJ Abrams, he's going to get good, and then you're going to trade him. So
no, and then you still got the ownership situation. Well, now are they going to Ted Lerner wanted to sell the team. Are they going to do it still? Who knows?
Right. And we should take time out to, offer condolences to the Lerner family, Ted Lerner passing away this week. And so that does put the franchise in a pretty murky situation because, he wanted to sell the team, but what is the family going to do about that? So,
but a pretty cool life. He was an usher at the old Griffith Stadium for some bad Senators teams. Winds up buying the team, world champion at the end. Yeah, kind of cool.
Just saw the alert also that Tim McCarver passed away.
Oh boy, so
sad to hear. Another 81 years old.
Yeah. Obviously, condolences to that family as well. Dave Preston's going to close us out on some Maryland women's basketball.
Yes, final game at home for the Maryland women next Tuesday. They take on a team that's ranked number 7 right now, Iowa. Caitlin Clark, easily a national player of the year candidate, let alone the Big Ten. Maryland lost by 14 in Iowa City a couple of weeks ago. Revenge is a dish best served cold, and it's a chance to see the Terps play Iowa. Maryland is a team that I could see anywhere from flaming out in the Big Ten tournament and losing in the first weekend to contending for a Final Four berth and playing in the Big Ten championship game. This is not a traditional powerhouse team. They don't have that athletic four that Brenda Fries is known for bringing in, from Laura Harper to an Alyssa Thomas to even a Marissa Coleman to even Chloe Bibby, who played well in the last couple of teams. I love the bobblehead.
Yeah.
So great chance to see some very high level basketball in the district. And along those lines, even though I don't think we're going to have everyone in the area make the tournament this year, everybody's playing so much better than they were last year. So that's with maybe one or two exceptions. So, but it's
especially Howard. Shout out Howard.
That was this week's Beltway basketball beat.
Beltway basketball beat, exactly. And also shout out Caitlin Clark. She is, I'm going to start calling her the equal opportunity employer, because every team in women's basketball can get that work. All right, guys, we did good work here today. It was another edition of the DC Sports Huddle, sponsored by MGM National Harbor. For the latest in Washington sports, visit MGM National Harbor and experience a sports fan's paradise. The king of the tri-corner hat, Dave Preston, bringing that mess back, and it was free, and he still overpaid for it. George Wallace signing off, and I am Rob Woodfork, once again breaking the huddle.